Hello, I'm Gail.
And hi, I'm Catherine. Well, welcome to Women Over 70 Aging Reimagined, our award-winning weekly podcast. Please visit womenover70.com, consider membership in our Aging Reimagined Circle, or become a sponsor. And do mark your calendar now to attend our symposium in the Chicago area on October 19th, 2024. Please join us in continuing to inspire women to age with curiosity, courage, and contribution.
And we're happy today to have Beverly Pimsleur in our studio. So welcome, Beverly. Good to have you.
Thank you so much. I feel very honored to be here with you two wonderful ladies. Women, I guess we should say.
Back in the 1960s, Beverly, who was 87, worked with her late husband, Paul Pimsleur, to create the Pimsleur Language Programs, which started as a mom-and-pop business in an Ohio basement and grew into one of the most successful self-instructional language companies in America, still going strong today under the ownership of Simon & Schuster. Beverly's husband died unexpectedly in Paris. She was left with a business not yet solvent and had to confront multiple personnel and professional obstacles to reinvent herself as a businesswoman and single parent of two young children. Beverly's second partner, with whom she had a 20-year relationship, also died. She's worked hard to put the joy back into her life. How she did this is what we want to discuss with her today. So, Beverly, you always wanted a big life. Your goal was to get out of Ohio. And so I ask you, was joy always a part of the way you lived your life?
Well, I was very fortunate to grow up in a very kind of eccentric Jewish Russian family where teasing was a part of what happened, joke telling, dancing, having parties. So I had that in my background, even though my parents' marriage was not a particularly happy one. I had cousins and aunts and uncles who really gave me an image of what a happy, joyous life could be. So for that, I was fortunate.
Uh-huh.
And was this in Ohio?
No, this was in Louisville, Kentucky. I actually grew up in many places in the South, but my mother's family was from Louisville, Kentucky, and I spent every summer there as a child, staying in different aunts and uncles' homes. We had a very large family. Until I was 18, and still I went off to college. So the South was very much a part of my life for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And so what made you get into the instructional language business?
Well, by getting married to Paul Pimsleur, who was kind of the wonderkind of the language world. I had always loved languages, French. I won't digress too much, but I had such a pronounced Southern accent that when we moved to Columbus, Ohio, all the children made fun of me, and I was sent to a special school called Frida Fraser's School of Elocution to get rid of my Southern accent. So I was sensitized at a very early age that language could make you an insider or an outsider, and how important language was. So I then took French, met my husband, and who was a French professor. And so that was perfect for me. I always wanted to go to France. I had my own plans to go there. And then I met my husband, and we ended up going there together.
Uh-huh. And was Pimsleur Language started in France?
No, actually, we started in Columbus, Ohio. So my husband had this very revolutionary idea of teaching spoken language. He was a French professor, and he noticed that in America, no matter how many years you studied a foreign language, which was usually by reading, memorizing grammar rules, once you got to a country, you couldn't even say one sentence. So he created a unique method of teaching. And he was then invited with a group of other linguists to Washington shortly after we were married. where the United States government was very interested in the crisis in American language teaching in the 1960s, partly spurred by Sputnik going off and showing the Americans that we were behind in everything, including language teaching. So we received a grant of $25,000. Now we kind of laugh at it, which was to keep us for 6 months to go to any foreign country of our choice and try out his method. Mm-hmm. So we chose Greece, even though my husband, who was fluent in Chinese, wanted to go to China, but you couldn't go to China then. You had to go to Taiwan. But I was doing a degree in ancient Greek and ancient Greek history, and I wanted to go to Greece. And maybe because he wanted to please his new bride, we went to Greece. And we did the template of the program, brought it back, then had another meeting with the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, who had funded us. And they were so excited with the results of the program that they wanted Paul to quit his job and work for the government. Well, he was not a team player. He was a very individualistic person. And so he said, if they like that program so much, why don't we go into business and we will sell the program? Well, easier said than done. We were academics. We did not have a clue about how to market this program. So it was not very successful. Unfortunately, during his lifetime, and when Paul died very suddenly of a heart attack in Paris when he was 48, we only had 5 programs. And then shortly after that, one of his colleagues contacted me and he said, Paul and I had been discussing my marketing those programs and us to create new programs. And so I signed a contract with Charles Hindley, a brilliant marketer, and we went into business. And he marketed and I helped train linguists to create new programs. Now, that was really difficult because, first of all, I was not a linguist. Secondly, I was a woman. These men did not want to work with me. But I was the only one who had ever worked with Paul. I knew his method. I helped him, we created. I was his guinea pig. And I had run in Athens, I had run a test group of 27 people taking the program for 4 months. So I really knew the nuts and bolts of that program. Mm-hmm. So we did a little bit of arm twisting, and 15 years later, we had 32 programs, and Simon & Schuster approached us to purchase the company. And that is kind of the odyssey the journey we took. And it really was a mom and pop organization at the beginning. I had shelves beside the dryer in the basement. And as I was throwing diapers in to wash and dry, I was hand writing out little tags to put on boxes to send these tapes around. Yeah.
Beverly, you had 2 young children when your husband died.
Yes. When my husband died, my daughter was only 8 and my son was 10. It was a very difficult, very challenging time for me.
And where were you living during that time?
Well, we were living in Paris when Paul died.
Yes.
He had been appointed as a professor at the Sorbonne, and we were really going to make our lives in France. So there I was, not quite knowing what to do. And I realized that I needed to go back to the United States. I was pulled in all different directions. My parents wanted me to come to Ohio. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law wanted me to come to California. Paul's mother wanted me to come to New York. But I thought we should go back to Albany, where Paul and I had been teaching previous to our leave. But of course, we had sold our house. But I thought it would give some continuity for my children. They had friends, and we had some family there. But after 1 year of living as the departmental widow in the English department, I realized that I really wanted to move to New York. So against everybody's advice, 1 year to the day my husband died, I moved to New York with my children.
And you stayed there.
And I stayed there. I stayed there for 14 years. During those years, I taught at Marymount for a while. I eventually started revising Paul's textbooks because the editor, who was his editor, had been my editor at Harcourt Brace. I had worked for him. And so I knew him, and he knew that I had done a lot of background work for Paul's book. So I ended up authoring 9 new textbooks, and then Macmillan approached me to write some of my own, which I did. And we continued to develop the Pimsleur programs. And then after 6 years of widowhood, I met my second partner, Peter, with whom I had a very, very different kind of life.
Different in what ways?
Well, first of all, he was an artist, a photographer, a Holocaust survivor, an incredibly interesting, charismatic man. And we decided that we would go back and live in Europe together. And at that point, my children were in college. So we went back to France and lived in Nice for 12 years, and until, unfortunately, they found he had a genetic disease, which as a Holocaust survivor, he could not have known about since we had no history of his families. And unfortunately he died. And that's where, that is a segue into the tango. You want me to make that segue?
That, yes, joy, getting joy back.
Well, when he was in the hospital, I had to take a bus. I was too much of a wreck to drive. And when I would get off the bus at the end of the day, and in Nice, where we lived, there was this beautiful plaza, and everybody was dancing the tango in the evening as I came back. And the music is so mesmerizing, and it's about sadness and loss, and it's melancholy, and it really helped me to listen to that music. And when I moved back to New York, I had what I call my Richard Gere moment. I was walking down Broadway, and I looked up and I see all these people dancing the tango. And I didn't even think about it. I just walked right up those stairs, walked up to the desk and said, I want to take tango lessons. Well, this young girl behind the desk, who was maybe 20, looked at me and said, well, have you ever danced before? And I said, oh, well, not really at, weddings. And said, oh, it's really hard. I don't think you should do that. Well, that's all somebody has to say to me. I don't think I should do that. So I said, no, I really, really want to do that. So I signed up, and I had no idea what I was doing. But surprise of surprises, my teachers and my partner said, oh, you're really very musical. Who knew? No idea that I had anything like that. And so I took tango very seriously. I started taking more lessons, going to milongas. I really became obsessed with it. And one reason was that it really helped me manage my grief. You cannot be thinking of yourself when you're worried about where your feet are. And people in the tango world are focused on dancing, and nobody wants you to talk about your sad story. And I found a new world of people. I had no idea that this kind of community existed. And I started traveling with tango groups. I joined a group in Rome and danced several places with them. There is this incredible organization called Tango at Sea, where you can take cruises and learn to dance the tango. And I went through the Panama Canal. I went to Turkey and Greece, and in between my time that I was working then with my daughter to create the little PIM programs. But I had a wonderful 13 years of dancing.
And you started at age 67, is
I
that right?
started at 67, if you can believe it. So that is something that I think is a message out there to all women who, I didn't know I had this ability. It just try something new. You never can tell what you maybe have some, connection to.
And 20 years later, do you continue to dance?
Okay, so first of all, slight correction. I'm only 86. So
Oh my gosh.
I'm only 86, not 87 quite
Yeah,
yet.
how did you have?
But I did stop dancing at 82. Or maybe you don't know, the tango world really doesn't start till very late at night. You start going out at 9, 11. Eventually I thought, really, really, do I want to continue doing this? And then I thought, I want to do something else in life. So I quit. And I was very worried about what could I find another passion, because I was really passionate about my dancing. And my daughter said, well, why don't you write your memoirs? I said, oh, no. I mean, that's for famous people. I'm not going to write memoirs. But I did start writing. And I did remember that when I was much younger, I loved to write. When I was 14, I actually had won this kind of medal as for the Ohio essay contest. I got a medal that looked like a military medal, but my mother carefully saved it in tissue in a box. I still have it. I taught for many years, so I had to write lectures. And I had this store of stories from this family I grew up with. And I thought, my children really need to know about these people. By the time they met them, they were all very old. But I thought it would be fun to write about my aunts and uncles and cousins and this kind of rather carefree life we had, riding horses in Kentucky, having outside barbecues. So I started writing and I started publishing. And so at one of these workshops where I was reading something, the head of the workshop said, you really need to write a bigger book. Do you need to write about the Pimsleur programs? You need to write about this and that. And I said, oh, I don't really want to do that. And she said, look, you're here. You paid your money for this workshop. Why don't you try it? So I did. I started writing about the Pimsleur programs, and everybody kind of liked the story. And then I went back to New York, and the pandemic hit. And I was very isolated. My kids were so protective. They wouldn't even let me go to the grocery. I'd have to sneak out of the house, to take a walk around the block. And I decided during the pandemic, well, what are the things that I said I always wanted to do and never got to do or never did? And one of them was to learn Italian. One of them was to play the piano. And then I decided I have a year, I'm going to write a memoir. So that's what I did during the pandemic. And I came out with this book that I call Repeat After Me, Love Affair with Language and Life. And that's where I am with my writing now. Although I have to tell you, it was much easier to write that book than it is to get an agent to publish it. So that's my challenge at the moment, is to find a book agent for my
agent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. So let's talk about joy for a moment, because you are very devoted to having joy in your life.
Yes. So one of the things that gives me joy in my life is cooking. I love to cook. Yeah, I'm sure you all know this book, The Love Language. Well, my love language is cooking. Mm-hmm. It is another thing. I had no idea I could even do it until I got married. And my husband was a real gourmet. And I got the message pretty soon, because his wedding present to me was the Larousse Gastronomique, which is the Larousse cookbook in French. So I thought, okay, got to step up here. And I discovered I loved cooking. And I was fortunate because at that time, Julie Child came upon the scene. And I watched every single program, cooked every single dish. I finally got to get my next present, or my next cooking book present, was a beautiful edition of The French Chef from my husband. So I continued to cook. And then when I met Peter, my partner, he was an amazing cook as well. So we shared that. Paul, my husband, loved to eat, but he was not very hands-on in the kitchen. Although I must say, he was incredibly liberated for a man of his generation, because he liked to do the dishes. He didn't even like to put them in the dishwasher. He washed all the dishes. So Peter and I cooked together, and that was actually part of our motivation for moving back to France. We bought an apartment 1 block from the market in Nice, where you could buy all the fresh fruits and vegetables and cook. And then after he died, and I still wanted to travel. I didn't have many people to travel with. Most of my friends were still married and had husbands. So I discovered cooking schools. And you can go on a wonderful vacation by yourself to go to a cooking school. So one of the cooking schools I went to was Patricia Wells' cooking school in Provence, the south of France. She was a protege of Julia Child. And I found myself cooking on Julia Child's stove. That was a big moment for me, because when Julia Child died, she gave Patricia Wells her stove, and that's what we cooked the week that we were at that class. And when I moved back to New York after Peter's death, and my daughter gave birth very shortly after that, and I don't even know where this idea came from. Maybe I suggested it, maybe she asked me, but she was a working and nursing mother, and somehow I started going to her house every Tuesday night and cooking. And this year will be the 20th year of Tuesday nights. My oldest grandson is turning 20 in September. And except for the pandemic and a few times we need to change it from Sunday to Monday or from Tuesday to Thursday, that's my gig. Everybody knows, don't ask Beverly on Tuesday. She's going to be cooking.
That's another book, another story, Beverly.
Sure is.
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't even know if that got into repeat after me, but it is something that gives me so much joy. And now my youngest grandson loves to cook too, and we do recipes together, and it's great.
That's terrific. So we ask all of our guests. We're always curious about this. How do you feel about your own aging?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, we're reminded of it every day when we look in the mirror. I look and think, "Oh, really? That's me without makeup. That's who I am." But I really try not to concentrate too much on that and on the outside. I'm very fortunate. I don't have a lot of problems that many women my age face. I have very good health. I don't have anything wrong with me at the moment. I have friends, family, a support group, which I think is incredibly important. I think the way aging impacts upon me personally is that I'm afraid I'm not going to have enough time to do all the things I want to do. There are so many things I still want to do, and I feel like I have to, speed up so that I can get through them all.
What are some of those things?
Right. So what are they?
Well, I'd like to see this book published. If I don't get an agent, I'll self-publish it. One of the things I want to do is to go back to teaching English as a second language, which I did when I lived in both France and Germany. And because I live in New York, we have a huge influx of immigrants. I think it's so important that these people get language instruction. New York City offers free language instruction. I'd like to apply to that program and be part of that team, because I myself saw how my lack of speaking fluent German, speaking fluent French, speaking fluent Greek impacted how I felt about living in those countries. And it was not until I became fluent in the language of the countries I lived in that I felt really comfortable. And we really need to help these people coming into our country to learn the language so that they can work and be independent and help their own children who will be in school and who will be speaking that language much more quickly than their parents if they don't know the language. So that is something I definitely want to do. Is one thing.
Wow. You are a dynamite person. You have well energy about that. Yes. And it's just really wonderful. And one more thing I just want to go back to. You mentioned that someone in your family was a Holocaust survivor.
Peter, the man I lived with. In fact,
so it wasn't
no, he wrote a beautiful memoir. I don't want to act as if I'm doing promotion on your program, but he wrote a beautiful memoir called The Forgetting of Being. His name is Peter Paz, but he died before he could complete it. And another thing that helped me get through my grief of losing him is that I decided that I would try to edit that. It was a daunting task because he had many, many versions of a lot of the same chapters. It took me 2 years to edit it. I hope I did right by him. And I self-published it. I had no idea, again, just like I had no idea how to promote the Pimsleur programs 20 years ago. I had no idea how to promote a self-published book. It kind of died on the vine. And I was thinking that I would like to try to get it published for the anniversary of the Holocaust that's coming up. Mm-hmm. And someone said, "Oh, well, it's being sold on Amazon." I said, "What?" And I called the company and I typed it in, and lo and behold, it is still available. It is available. And so I don't know that another publisher would take it because of it being there, but it is a beautiful memoir, a very unusual story of how he survived because he was liberated by the Russians when he was 8 and sent to Israel. And his talent as a dancer and musician was recognized right away in the kibbutz. And they sent him to learn dance. And when he was 21, he came to, he received a scholarship at Juilliard School of Music. And he was a dancer with Martha Graham for many years.
Oh, goodness. Say the name of the book again, please.
It's called The Forgetting of Being. It's a quote from a German philosopher.
Spelled Peter's name.
It's Peter, and then his last name is P-A-Z. And it's when he stopped dancing and became a photographer. And that's when I met him, because I was looking for a photographer for one of my books. And that's a whole other story. Which I do tell and repeat after.
It's lovely. Have to have you back.
Yes.
Well, this has been a delight. This has been so enjoyable. I most appreciate you having me here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And listeners, because of your loyalty, our numbers continue to grow. And still, we do need your support. So visit womenover70.com, join Aging Reimagined Circle, or make a donation, and let your voice be heard and help change the conversation about women aging.